Harms. Chair recognizes the senator representing District 11.
Thank you. And Mr. President, members of the legislature, this morning I'm going to put myself squarely in harm's way. This is one of the most outlandish, ridiculous, preposterous waste of time and money that has come before this legislature in a long time. Read the language of the bill. You've got a lot of generalizations that take you nowhere. There have been studies galore on these issues. If they would just reevaluate and study those studies for which tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars in total have been spent on. What are they for? I'd like to ask Senator Burling a question, because and while he's getting himself together, I tried to kill this thing last session. And as a favor to Senator Burling, some people voted for it.
Senator Burling, will you yield to Senator Chambers for a question?
Yes.
Senator Burling, if you recall, who requested that you bring this idea last session?
Who requested?
Yes.
It was my idea.
Who drafted the bill?
Well,
come on.
Myself and the bill room and...
Senator Burling, you didn't come up with this language. Who gave you this language? Level, they're bills that I bring, and if somebody gives me an idea, I don't mind acknowledging where the idea comes from. Who gave you this language?
Well, there were several of us that sat down together and just kind of came up with it. And
I'm going to say like the owl. Who?
Well, that's been 2 years ago. I don't remember who we all were.
Thank you, Senator Burling. Does that let you see what I'm talking about? Why cannot a person in a straightforward way say with whom he worked? I don't believe Senator Burling has forgotten who gave him this language. He thinks that if he tells you who gave him the language, that in itself will turn you against the bill. We should insist on full disclosure on this floor. You know why they started so late? Because in the exec board, I wasn't interested in putting this nonsensical commission or whatever it's called together. We voted and voted and voted and voted and couldn't get 5 votes for people. Then finally, out of desperation, people started saying, well, we got to give somebody the votes to get them on this commission. Laughter while we were considering it. A waste of time. Senator Burling barely got on the commission. And he was the one who brought it. People on this floor are not forthright. We need to stop doing things as favors to people when we're spending the taxpayers' money and creating the illusion that something is being done when nothing is being done. What does this mean when we look in this bill? And it says on page 2 in line 8, this is just something at random. Examine household tax burdens and business tax burdens as compared to the United States as a whole. Compared to the United States as a whole, with all the differences in the individual states, regions of the country. But that sounds good to the mentality of those who sit in legislatures. We continue. And states having demographics similar to those of Nebraska and recommend improvements. Improvements to the United States as a whole, to these other states, to Nebraska. Senator Harms said the only thing people in his district are interested in is lowering property tax. So suppose this commission comes back with something that doesn't say lower property tax. You think that Senator Harms is going to change his mind? This is a waste. It's pointless. And I'm going to do everything I can this session to kill this bill. There has been nothing generated that can be presented as a basis to continue this. Senator Raikes is an economist. Is he on the floor today? Well, he may not be here right now, but I'm going to make a statement that is sound, and I'm not an economist. Do not send good money after bad. Do not send good money after bad. These new people running around telling the people who sent them down here, we're going to do something about taxes. Governor's talking about giving a tax increase.
Time. Senator Chambers, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Executive budget 2007 to 2009 biennium. Waste of money on all this paper. Who reads the whole thing? Governor Dave Heinemann, State of the State address. Who reads that? Executive budget in brief. You already know in general what you're going to do when we get to the budget, but you have to go through all this expenditure of money, this wastage. So while you are running around misleading the people who were tricked into voting to send you down here, that you're going to cut taxes, and you, one of the first things out of the gate, you're going to waste money on a nonsensical, worthless commission. And tell the people in your district what it's about. Let them read it. And they'll say, why, I sent you down there, and you're going to swallow that? Who do you need to tell you what needs to be done about taxes in Nebraska? There are not 2 million people who live in this state, and we don't have sense enough collectively. And with the staff that we have in research, with the availability of agencies whose information you might have to take with a grain of salt, but part of our job is to be able to evaluate and analyze. We need somebody, group of people, to sit around and say, yeah, you know, one thing, something needs to be done about taxes. Well, what do you think we ought to do about taxes? Well, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think we ought to lower them. Well, how are we going to lower the taxes? Well, I'm going to lower Senator McDonald's taxes by making Senator Stoopman pay more. That's a good idea, because look at the two of them. Which one's taxes would you lower? My seat made. And whose taxes are you going to raise? Why, Senator Stoopman. He's got, if you have no, he got great, big, broad shoulders. If Senator Stoopman's height matched his shoulders, he'd be as tall as I'd be if my height matched my feet. I would be 7 feet 2 inches tall. And it would take at least 2 or 3 more feet in height for Senator Stoopman. Don't feel sorry for us. We delight in short jokes because each of us is short. And he will hit me on occasion with something that I wish I had thought of. But that's what they're going to say. Stop these from paying taxes over here, make somebody else pay them over there. You know that when you give away the store to these big corporations, that the amount of money the state is going to need to operate is not going to diminish. So if you have to continue bringing in revenue for the state, and all we have are the sales tax and the income tax, if the corporations are not paying theirs, but we have to keep the same amount in the tub, those others who are paying taxes have to pay more. So why will a governor support giving breaks to these big shots? Because they're the ones who contribute to campaigns. And as for the rural people, I feel sorry for them. I have tried to overcome resistance from senators who are down here representing the rural area. I have to overcome their resistance to my getting money for them. Last session, there was some kind of rural initiative, and I was going to get them $100,000 or $150,000 so the program would at least look somewhat credible. I argued on the floor and said, you gave everything to Omaha. And you know why I had to argue that way? Because they were coming to me and say, well, Senator Chambers, we like this, but we agreed with the Omaha senators that we wouldn't ask for any more money. I said, any more? You don't have any. You gave them everything, and I'm willing to run interference for you, and I will make the legislature give you this money or their budget won't move. Well, we'd like to, but we can't. I said, well, will you at least stay out of my way and let me do it? Well, we can't. I said, then have it your way. I'm not going to help you do anything again. Then I think about the poor, misled people in the rural areas who thought they were sending people to look out for their interests, and I recanted, relented, and to help the people, I'm going to still do what I can to help the people in rural areas in disregard of the people on this floor who haven't got two brain cells working when it comes to insisting on something for their people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, this is your third time. You may continue.
And I'm just getting warmed up. But I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to speak on this bill because I'm going to offer some amendments, and we're going to stay on this bill. Y'all want to waste money? Then you're going to find out that time can be a way to stop you from wasting money, because I'm going to take your time. The more time I can take from you on craziness like this, the less damage you can do to the public. Have you read the bill? Have you read it? If you were compiling a roadmap for a commission to study, would you have done it like this? Take it to a high school English teacher. Well, they teach civics still. Sit and let the kids look at this and say, that's what the legislature is going to spend money for. And see what these kids think. And if the kids are not that familiar because they get inferior education in Omaha and throughout the rest of the state at the high school level, take it to some college kids, especially in an economics class. Let them look at this. And they say, that's what we've got down there in that legislature? That's what we've got down there in the legislature? And you know what these kind of bills make me say from time to time? If people come down here with a thimble full of brains, why should I expect from them a bushel basket full of sense? This is a travesty. Let the thing perish and be buried. But you guys, some of you, are going to have to feel that you got to do something for Senator Burling because you feel sorry for him. Senator Chambers was so mean to Senator Burling because he's up there talking about we ought to be careful how we spend money. Well, Senator Burling wants the bill. He brought one last session and got it. We should have killed it. But we didn't. I tried. Senator Burling was sitting where Senator White sits now. And I think that because they don't allow asbestos to be utilized anymore, he couldn't get enough asbestos to put in his britches. And the heat got to be a little more than he wanted to contend with down here. So he got as far away from me as he could get because he couldn't bump some of those farther behind him. You know why I'm doing this and being as blunt as I am? We're doing the public's business. Think about those promises you made when you were running. Then you get here and fear takes over. It's easy to say things on the campaign trail because in your mind you might even be saying, they won't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to do this. These dumbbells won't have any way of knowing that I'm tricking them. And on the other hand, there may be some people who were very sincere in everything they said. And the only place where they strayed and went too far was when they suggested that they could come down here single-handedly and turn things around. But their honest intent may have been to try to make some changes. Then they get down here and some piece of trash like this comes up. I call legislation what it is. And they say, well, I know what I said, but I got to go along with this. Why? Can you take this back to your constituents, those who understand a little bit about money and the value of money, and justify our keeping in existence a commission like this, which we could scarcely get enough people on in the first place? I thought
1 minute.
that the whole thing would collapse because as late as we were in putting people on it, they wouldn't have time enough to do any damage and the thing would go away. Then here comes Senator Burling, like Bela Lugosi. I have a bill which I want you to help me with. He wants to resuscitate this thing, and I don't. And I'm far from through with it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. The chair recognizes Senator Wallman from Portland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the body, thank you, Senator Chambers. And I am on the same page as Senator Chambers. I don't think we can keep throwing money around to study this, study that, and nothing seems to happen. And my constituents, and as a former school board member, I can also attest to, you give money here and there, and it always seems to perpetuate more money. And it's not a tax savings, it's a tax increase no matter how you cut it. 100,000 here, 100,000 there, pretty soon, what do you have? $1 million. And does $1 million bother you? 100,000 bother you? I don't know. But it bothers me to spend money for something as a study that we should have known to do better before. So why throw good money after bad? It's up to you people here, but I am on the same page as Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Stoutman, not only for the time, but for your comments. The public may not realize that the state does not levy property taxes. The Constitution took that away from the state. We will not raise 1 penny of anybody's property tax. And sometimes politicians are a bit disingenuous. I'm going to try to not use words that sound so harsh, but which will nevertheless get across the same idea. They would be disingenuous and suggest that there's a way to get the state to act so that property taxes will lower. But that is not going to happen unless those senators want to come here and have us enact a law limiting the amount of property tax that can be assessed and collected. And some people might say, yeah, that's good, but I want to see the politician who will do it, because if that politician gets it done, then in his or her community, when they go for these things that they're accustomed to having, their city or their county or their school district or whichever taxing agency is raising money by property tax has to say, we can't do that anymore. Then those people say, well, why? Well, you know, I promised to lower property tax, so I got the legislature to pass a law so that these entities cannot raise the property taxes. Well, then where are we going to get the money to keep these things going? Well, that's when they kind of lower their head and they start shuffling their feet, and they say, well, you just have to do without, because the only place we were getting money from was property tax. But you said you wanted the property tax lowered, and I did the only thing at the state level I could. I'm not letting them raise as much property tax. They don't hear that now. What they are aware of is that they are feeling a pinch because things that they were receiving in the form of services or whatever no longer will be available. That's why the other day I was saying we have to exercise our judgment and make decisions, because although we come from districts, we're described as state senators, not district senators, and that's why I will continue to help rural people, even if their senators don't want me to. They are a part of the state. Everybody is. And if we can make the entire state healthy, then everybody in the state is going to have his or her health improved along with it. Some things will be difficult because we have to break out of the status quo mold and make changes, and we'll find they're not as painful as we thought, and they will produce a more wholesome result than we at first believed possible. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Mr. Clerk, are there any amendments to this bill?
Mr. President, I have a motion to indefinitely postpone offered by Senator Chambers. Senator Burling, you'd have the option to lay the bill over or take it up at this time, Senator.
Take it up.
Senator Chambers, you are recognized to open on your motion to indefinitely postpone LB 344.
Thank you, Mr. President. To be blunt, this is a kill motion. Now I'm assuming the role of Dr. Von Helsing. I have a sharpened stake, and I have Dracula in my sights, but I need help. I can provide the stake. I'm willing to place the stake, and I'm willing to strike the first blow, but I need some additional assistance, and that can be STANCE and STANTS. assistance in the form of individuals, assistance in the form of help to get this done. This kill motion, if adopted, will end the discussion that we're having. This bill will die, and that commission will cease to be based on the date that's in the law now. Nothing of value has come from that commission. The meetings have been very few. They had to scramble like crazy to find what was called a facilitator. They can't even get it going, and that, in a way, gives you an idea of what it's going to come up with. Haste makes waste. They're running just to be able to make a report in order to make a report. How many of you are going to alter your view that property taxes need to lower? How many of you who will be called all kind of terrible things because you believe that maybe children in poverty, single-parent families, whether the parent is a male or a female, who cannot get a job paying enough money to earn a living wage, ought to be able to turn to the state for some kind of help? One reason, I have a lot of them, I don't believe in all that praying before the legislature. They don't do any good. I watch your conduct. They don't affect your conduct. There are a lot of people in here who are Catholics. I have a Catholic education. I went to a Jesuit university. I graduated from a Jesuit university. I graduated from Tech High, which did not have a high academic reputation. And I graduated on time because I was given a half a credit for having played football or something like that. So I graduated on time. And I went to Creighton University because it was within walking distance of my house rather than go to what was then Omaha University. And I went to Creighton. And I took the entrance exam. And they were astonished and thought somebody graded it wrongly because I scored so high I wound up in what they call honors English. Creighton was easy for me. I took all of these philosophy courses, which in fact were Catholic theology, misnamed philosophy. So I picked up on what Catholics are supposed to believe. Society has an obligation to its members. There should be a level established which constitutes a point below which a person cannot be considered to be living in decency. There should be adequate housing, adequate sustenance, the availability of medical care. All of those essentials that go into making a person able to live with a sense of self-respect, the ability to provide for himself, herself, and their family. Yet, when we come to this legislature, I don't see any of that reflected, so why do y'all even talk about religion and have all these prayers? They don't mean anything. They're stopped by that ceiling. So the words sound good, just like the words about reducing taxes and cutting government sound good. Then you come up with something like LB 344. It was no good in its inception. It has been no good having been voted into law and signed by the governor. Why would he sign something like this? He's the one who wants to cut taxes, and this couldn't be the law if he didn't sign it. But the governor doesn't get blamed. You know who gets blamed? Those 49 lunkheads down there. Then you know what they hasten to say? Well, I'll leave Senator Chambers out of this because he tries. I take my lumps down here. I take so many lumps down here, new brothers and sisters, that I identify with the soccer ball. And I share empathy with anybody else who feels for the soccer ball, because all it's for is to be kicked. But my job is to have a thick skin. I know the nature of politics. And every time one of these bad bills comes along, I'm going to do what I can to prune it from the Christmas tree of legislative unwisdom. If this thing goes away, the state is not harmed. But you cannot establish that if it stays another year, the state and the people will benefit. What are they going to tell you? Some people say taxes are too high. I could come up with all kind of jesting statements that you've heard 1,000 times. But the thing about it, every one of them would have a kernel of truth. And that's why they would be amusing, humorous, or outright funny. Because they draw into sharp focus the ridiculousness of certain situations that exist. And that's what makes it funny. There's an incongruity. So what I'm offering you this morning is the opportunity to kill this bill and limit the amount of discussion I will do on this bill. But I intend to demonstrate at the outset that I will fight these kind of things, even though somebody might say there's not that much money involved. You know why they wound up with as much money as they did last time? I offered an amendment. It was designed to kill the bill because the governor was talking about saving money. But if they were not going to kill it, there should have been enough money to at least make a credible start. So when I don't like things, but I see they're going to go, and it's going to have the stamp of the legislature, at least put enough in the pot to cook something. The whole thing is a waste. You know, when you get old, not many of you are in that boat with me. You're entitled, old folks are, we're entitled to have moods. And as I say, I feel a mood coming on. I don't have those senior moments because I think that's when you're supposed to not know where you are and you're supposed to slobber on yourself and be that typical person who's lost your bearings, your orientation, and they say, oh, I never want to get old like that. They make a lot of jokes about us old folks, don't they? But what I'm trying to do is break the mold and so that you can become old without becoming moldy. You don't have to say because I'm 60, 70, or 80, and you don't know which of those I am. But I'm certainly not as young as 60. It's a number. It means what you let it mean. You can keep your intellectual sharpness if you had any. And if you don't have any, it's not too late to get it. Nature gives us what we need to survive in an environment. And if it's hostile, the potential is within us to find the means to survive in the hostile environment. If we don't use the brains, nature is going to take away what we're not using. But if we use it, nature will cause it to gain strength and greater facility. And you can get smarter as you get older. But if you accept the notion that when you get old, you're worthless, you need people to cart you around, to talk about you as though you're not present. And when they acknowledge your presence, they either talk real loud because you can't hear or understand, and they break things down so that a 3-year-old child can understand it, because now you're returning to your origins. And that's what this society does. Oh, they make a lot of statements about senior citizens because they don't want to call us old. Calling me that doesn't stop me from being old if I'm old. So we change the language without changing the attitudes. What I want to do this morning, though, is find a way to kill this bill. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Fulton. Thank you, Senator Carlson. Senator Chambers.
Madam President, members of the legislature, I'm not going to do the legislature's work on every bill. We have 3 stages of debate: general file, select file, and final reading has become a debating stage now. The appropriate time to do the heavy lifting on a bill is general file, right where we are now. If people don't have enough information to satisfy them that this is a good bill, it ought not be voted for. Form should not be elevated over substance. This bill can be bracketed to a day certain. If you think that by March you're going to know more than you know now, then bracket it until a day in March. And then it can be unbracketed, and then the discussion can be had. But if you're going to say, okay, the first stage of debate is where the bulk of the discussion should occur. But because I'm not really prepared on this bill, I'm not going to require that the debate occur here. I'll advance it to the next stage of debate, which is select file. Most people are going to find out that with their responsibilities growing rather than lessening, they will have even less time then than they had up to this point, and they're going to rely on others to make a decision for them. And the argument will be made again. Well, we can always refuse to pass it, so we'll advance it on the final reading, because under the rules of the legislature, we can make a motion to bring it back to select file to amend it. But while we're on general file, you can offer any amendment that you want. You can amend an amendment. On select file, you can do that. But if you advance it to final reading and you bring it back to select file, you can only offer what's called a specific amendment. The only thing that can be discussed or debated that can be voted on will be the specific or precise amendment that you offer. So if you bring it back to select file and you look at the amendment that you agreed to bring it back to attach to the bill, and you say, wait a minute, this amendment is not quite as well drafted as it should be, so I'm going to offer an amendment to it. Well, you can't. It's out of order. The only thing you can do is vote that amendment up or vote it down. If you vote it down, then the bill is advanced to final reading, unless people decide, well, I don't even like this bill, so I'm not going to vote to advance it. So then it stays on select file. The consequences of actions ought to be taken into consideration. What Senator Heidemann said about the budget bill having to go first, that is pursuant to the rules of the legislature. Any rule adopted by the legislature can be suspended by 30 votes. So these things that people say are true as far as they go. But these are not things written in stone. They're written in rules which can be suspended, and they are routinely, when we deal with certain matters, suspended. I'm going to let you all handle this bill. See, this is one that I refer to, with all due respect, as white folks' mess. Y'all can argue and scrap and snarl at each other, and it's not going to amount to
1
a hill of
minute.
beans. What are you going to do with the bill? You're going to lower property taxes, you're going to give money here and take it from there, or what you're going to do? Well, you're just not sure. That's why you don't want to have to be responsible for casting a vote on the merits of the bill, because you don't know what the bill's going to do. So you say, well, the easy thing is to just send it on over there. You will not lose the opportunity to debate this bill if you don't advance it today. I have just a couple more things I want to say, so I'll turn on my light, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator White. Senator Chambers.
Madam President, members of the legislature, I was over here in a high-level discussion in the culture corner, and I didn't hear what my colleague Senator White said, but he's over there grinning like a Cheshire cat. He must have taken my name in vain. But at any rate, I want to go back to what I was talking about. The reason I'm not going into the merits or demerits of this bill is because I want to just talk about the process here, so you won't think that if a bill is not voted forward today, that it's not going to have another opportunity to be voted on. Now, if it were killed today, obviously, it wouldn't have. If the body thinks that it ought to go forward, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I haven't even formulated my view on this bill other than that I'm against it. The Highway Trust Fund is not sacred to me. It's not. Senator Warner is the one who really kind of got that aura built up around the Highway Trust Fund, and he happened to have been married to a lady who was involved with roads and the people who build roads and things like that. But the Highway Trust Fund is not sacred. To me, there are things more important than the Highway Trust Fund. And when one of those things comes along, money can be taken out of the Highway Trust Fund and used for that which has a higher priority, just as the legislature has taken money from other funds. But the highway builders apparently have some power. How does a special interest group get power that is translated into influence over a legislative body? They'll campaign for you or against you. And those are the things that cause senators to act in many cases. But right now, I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about a bill about which some people have questions, as I've detected from listening. If the senators think that their questions can be adequately answered, then advance the bill with no qualm of conscience. But here's what you have to understand about this process. Ernie and I were talking about it over here, and he made a very good point, which I neglected to mention before. When the bill gets to select file, which is the second stage, if you're not attentive, if you haven't put amendments on the bill or motions to hold it up, that bill will be advanced on a voice vote. They'll say LB 305 and whatever happened to it, and then whoever is chairperson of E&R will move that the bill be advanced, and the chair will say, all those in favor say aye, and there'll be a few sleepy aye. All opposed say nay, and the only ones who will vote nay sometimes will be me, and on occasion Senator Stoopman, but the bill will be gone. Then it comes up for final reading, and people might pay attention. They say, wait a minute, is this that bill on taking the money from new car sales and leased vehicles? Uh-huh. How did it get way over here? Well, it was voted over there. I didn't vote for it. Well, you sat there and didn't vote against it, so that's the process. You blinked, and it was over. Well, what do I do now? Learn from that and pay attention next time. Maybe this bill has enough significance to cause people to pay attention as it moves forward, if it moves forward. I'd like to ask Senator Fisher a question.
Senator Fisher, would you yield to Senator Chambers?
Of course, Madam President.
Senator Fisher, did you introduce this bill or the committee? Oh, it was introduced by...
I introduced this bill on... It is my own bill. I introduced it for myself. It is
1
not
minute.
a committee bill. It went before Revenue.
In my book, I'm looking at LB 2027, but this is your individual bill.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Did you consult with somebody in deciding that this was a source of money to go into the Sacred Cow Fund?
I consulted with a number of people that this would be a good source of money to go into the Sacred Highway Trust Fund.
And if it does not go there, what is the worst thing that can happen? And I'm not going to argue with your conclusion.
I think the worst thing that would happen is we would be making a mistake in viewing policy and how that fund should be funded. I think a mistake in not advancing this bill would be that our highways, maintenance and construction would continue to deteriorate, and we would have a number of unmet needs in this state. A number of senators have come to me with projects that they want in their area.
I'm sorry, your time is
That's not
up.
going to happen now.
Chambers. And Senator Chambers, this will be your third time.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the legislature, maybe by me using the term sacred cow, my colleague who makes sausage thought I was talking about a moral issue. This one is not a moral issue. This is just where the money's going to go and where you're going to take it from, and he will find out the power of the road building lobby before it's over. I'm just running a red flag up. You can ignore it, but you're going to find out, and the rest of you are going to find out, that this legislature is run by that lobby. You come down here and you think you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and they'll tell you, you got this bill, we'll kill this bill, and we'll fight you in your next election. And then suddenly you go, oh, so that's what he's talking about. I've been here 37 years. You know what the lobbyists used to do when I first got here? They used to sit under the balcony. And I ridiculed the legislature for letting them sit there, and they could smoke on the floor at that time, too. And I put so much heat on them, the lobbyists decided that may not be the best place. So then they were moved to that balcony behind the chamber, and nobody could sit up there except the lobbyists. And I called it the buzzard's roost. And I'd look back at there, and I'd say, now I don't know the difference between a buzzard and a vulture, or whether they're the same, but that's where they roost. And that was off limits to the public. And you're going to tell me these lobbyists don't have power? You come down here after I've done a lot of heavy lifting. I know what they are. And you're going to find out, not just you, but the rest of you. What do you think they get paid for? When they invite you to a dinner, you think they're feeding you because you look malnourished? They want something from you. And you're going to become what I have dubbed Captain Lunch Hunters. You're going to be hunting lunches all session. And if your wife or your significant other is able to do a little stitching, they're going to cut that seam in the back of your breeches and put a triangle in there so the waist can be made bigger without all of your pants being made bigger. You're going to start wearing bigger coats. And some of you are going to start walking around with your coats unbuttoned. Not because you want to be casual. That girth just cannot be contained in that coat anymore. And you're lucky that the head doesn't swell in the same way that the rest of the body does when you eat a whole lot of food. But here's the point I'm getting to on what we're talking about here today. You'll probably advance this bill. Go ahead. I don't even care what you do with it today. Because if I develop an attitude against it, I will do what I can to stop it. But you won't know how to stop it, and you dare not try. Because there will be people pulling that string on you. As we go on, this ought to be dubbed Pinocchio's legislature. Why? Because it'll be a puppet legislature. Maybe I'll stop telling y'all things, just let you find out on your own. Bump your head. If a bill is important, you don't have to debate it at all. You can let it go. You can let it move to final reading on a voice vote. Then you can vote for it on final reading without knowing what it is. One of the requirements of being in the legislature is not that you be intelligent. You don't have to be intelligent to be here. You don't have to have education to be here. I don't even think I see in the Constitution where you have to be able to read and write. And in the old days, they had final reading because some of the people sitting in the legislature could not read. That's where final reading came from. There are reasons behind this stuff that is done. You have to be a certain age. You have to be in a certain district from which you intend to run. And you have to be outside the penitentiary.
1 minute.
And that's about it. And you can come down here. So this is not considered by anybody to be a distinguished institution of government, people by distinguished people. We are held in contempt. We are the butt of everybody's joke. And sometimes we justify that. But y'all can do whatever you want to whether I give you permission or not. And sometimes when I tell you don't do this, you're going to do it. When I tell you do this, you're going to do the opposite. But it's fun being in the legislature on occasion. And not so much fun on others. But I'm going to watch and see how you all do on this. But I might offer a motion to bracket the bill. But before I do that, I'm going to talk to Senator Fisher. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Madam President, members of the legislature, I appreciate Senator Nankin speaking. What really caught my attention was when she referred to the university system as her beloved university system. The president of her beloved university system, President Milliken, is distressed because he feels the governor is not going to make enough money available to the beloved university system. And it puzzles me why somebody who loves that system is willing to take money out of the pot from which money for that system would come. The general fund is going to be reduced by this bill. I wonder how, now it's been a long time since I was in a romantic relationship with a young woman. And I'm not one of those old gentlemen who's December 31st trying to mess with somebody who's May 2nd. But I'm wondering what a woman would think of me if I told her, honey, I really love you. You're in my thoughts all the time. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. And she'd say, well, Ernie, what I'd like is a new dress. And I saw one at such and such a place, and it only costs so much and so much. I say, oh, well, it costs so much and so much. You know, honey, I'd really like to get that for you, but I got to go down with my bookie and lay a wager, so I can't get you the dress today. Well, you don't love me. Well, yes, I do. I said I do. You love your bookie more than you love me. I say, why do you say that? Because you have to make a choice. You don't have enough money to buy me the dress and take care of your bookie, so you chose the bookie. So you don't really care about me. So I have to conclude that roads are more important than the beloved university. Only indirectly would these roads do anything. I'm going to tell y'all what the problem with Nebraska is. The population is not large. There are some areas of the state where the population is very sparse. You should not run certain roads in those areas, even though people have to get from point A to point B. You don't have enough financial resources to do it. Money is wasted on roads in this state because the road builders have a powerful lobby, and they'll tell a senator, we'll run a 4-lane highway out there so that 6 people in your area can make it to the interstate. Well, you love that. If there's going to be a comprehensive plan, it should be with reference to whether or not these roads that are being built and maintained ought to be built or ought to be maintained. The thing again about the body. If you gain more weight, more blood vessels are going to be created to nourish that extra weight. So if you have 6 people there and 3 people over there, you're going to do like the body does and build roads to those individuals, to those few people. It would be nice if the state could be all things to all people and give everything to everybody that would make them happy. When it comes to the essentials of life, food, clothing, shelter, medical care, education, I'm with you, and I'll demonstrate it. But when it comes to all these miscellaneous roads, no specifications, I won't support it, but I know you all will. But remember, when you take money out of the general fund for one thing, it's not there for something else. So don't talk to me when we get to the budget and UNL's budget, or NU's budget, because it's not just UNL. Don't talk to me about there not being enough money and we ought to give more than what the governor said. The governor wants this bill. That's probably why he didn't offer a bill to do this.
1 minute.
Y'all need to find out, as you will, as time goes on, that there are certain fingerprints on bills. And who really wants the bill and why. If they cared about what's happening in the rural area, we put some money into some redevelopment programs based on what is happening in the rural areas. And I'm going to talk about that more and more from time to time. And I think I'll turn my light on again, even if I don't have a chance to speak this morning. Thank you. And Senator Waldman, I like that designation of me as somebody. I will accept that as my new nickname. Members of the legislature, when Senator White mentions that the citizen is making a decision about where money is going, no, the citizen is making a decision about how he or she is going to spend his or her money to meet his or her needs. I'd like to ask Senator Cruz a question because he'll know the answer.
Senator Cruz, would you yield to Senator Chambers?
Senator Cruz.
Yes, I think so.
Could the legislature put a surtax on car leasings and say that that's the money derived from that surtax would go to the roads fund? Could the legislature do that?
Yes, it could.
Now, are these cars being leased by poor people or wealthy people, by and large, companies, corporations, and others who could afford to pay a surtax?
It really varies according to how many miles they're going to drive.
But if a surtax is put on leased cars, that surtax is going to be paid by people who can afford to pay it, whether they want to or not. Would you agree?
In general, yes.
Thank you. Members of the legislature, why don't you do that? Instead of taking money out of the general fund, if you say the roads need money, then put a surtax on these car leasings and let that money go. But you know why they're not going to do that? Because who's going to pay it? The corporations, and they have power, and they say you better not do it. They got bankers running around here saying that this legislature dare not give a certain homestead exemption so that people can keep their homes because the bankers want to take their homes. A $12,000 exemption on your home. And then in a judgment, they can take your home. And they are upset because the Judiciary Committee had the nerve, in their opinion, to agree to a $60,000 exemption for somebody's home. Old people, poor people, $60,000 is not going to get you much in the way of a home. What I want is an unlimited exemption. And let these people be more careful about trying to entice people into debt, that the enticer knows the person can't pay. But if they've got a home, the enticer knows I can get the home that way when I couldn't get it another way. That's what these corporations have the power to do, and it's why the legislature is not going to mess with them. Bring a surtax on the leasings, and maybe I'll support that, but I'm not going to support this. And I have a little discussion going on with the president of the university that may determine how much I will support the university's efforts down here. But I do think that it makes more sense when we are establishing priorities to benefit the public at large, to take money from the highway fund and put it someplace else than to take money from the general fund. I'd like to ask, who is somebody on the Transportation Committee? Oh, I see the chair. I didn't see. Senator, I would like to ask you a question, and that is Senator Fisher I'm addressing, if she will answer a question.
Senator Fisher, would you yield to Senator Chambers?
Certainly, Madam President.
Senator Fisher, what limit is placed on the amount? First of all, who can increase the fuel tax as an increase is deemed to be needed?
Are you speaking about the fixed portion of the fuel tax or the variable?
The variable.
Senator Chambers, you're now on your time.
Yes, thank you.
The variable tax portion of the fuel tax is determined by the budget of the Department of Roads in order to meet the needs of that budget.
Senator Fisher, has the Department of Roads periodically increased the fuel tax, the variable portion?
The variable has been increased, Senator Chambers. I don't believe the Department of Roads as such is the entity that increases that variable.
I mean, they put it in their budget and then the legislature rubber stamps it. Are you aware of any time the Roads Department has come with an increase in their budget and the legislature denied it?
I have no knowledge of what's happened in the past, Senator Chambers, with that Roads Department budget. I'm sorry.
But in general, the structure of the law allows the Roads Department to determine through its budgeting process what the fuel tax ought to be, even though the legislature would have to approve through an appropriation.
I would disagree with you on the way you phrased your comment.
Phrase it correctly, Madam Chairman.
The legislature, I believe, has the authority in approving the budget of the Department of Roads in setting the variable on the gas tax.
Okay. I agree. I accept the way you phrased it.
Thank you.
But here's what state has the highest gas tax in the country?
Are you still addressing me?
Yes, ma'am.
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but Nebraska would be high because that is one of the only ways that we finance our roads. Other states take money from the general fund. We do not.
But Nebraska is among the highest, the states with the highest gas tax. among the top. It's right near the top, isn't it?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I will be happy to have it on select file when we discuss this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will tell you all, Nebraska is right near the top, if not at the top. When the Department of Roads brings something over here, they get it. If you want to see a fund defended more vigorously than any other fund, let it be talk about the Highway Trust Fund. I've been here and I've seen it. I saw how it started, at least from 1970 when I got here 37 years ago, up until now. It is defended like nothing else in this state. And they get what they want. That's why the taxes are so high. And Senator Waldman is correct about these crumbling, poorly constructed roads. In some areas of this state, when you go over a relatively new stretch of the interstate, it's like driving on a washboard. And you see mismatched surfacings on the interstate where they're constructing or widening. There will be a crack where two pieces that they're putting together come together, and it's noticeable when you drive over it. Over here, asphalt or something. Over here, something partly red, and over there, concrete. These roads in Nebraska are some of the most poorly constructed roads you will find in this country. Because the road builders call the shots. They will determine the quality of the road. Why do you think it would be to their advantage to build a road that's going to last when they make their money by either building or repairing? If I were a dishonest person, I'd become a lobbyist for somebody, and I would bleed this legislature dry.
1 minute.
Or start me a company. And I'd grease the right palms in Washington in the U.S. Attorney's Office so I wouldn't be hit with a RICO charge. Racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations. That's what RICO is about. And it happens all around in states everywhere. But I'm not going to go too far beyond what we're talking about here. I'm not going to support this bill. I'm not going to try to stop it here. I'm not going to offer a motion to amend. I'm not going to offer a motion to bracket. I'm going to let the legislators do what they want to do without any effort by me to stop them. But when we get to select file, don't be saying, this is such a good bill, we ought to let it go on so that we can do this or that or the other, or we can get our marching orders from whoever the lobbyist is who gives you your marching orders. Some of you talk to the governor, ask him, does he like this bill? Does he think money ought to be taken out of the general fund? Where's the tax cut coming from? Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Adams, I'd like to ask you a question. Potentially, how many cities or entities would be taking advantage of this service of the auditor?
Senator Adams, will you yield to a question from Senator Chambers?
Certainly. To my knowledge right now, I have letters from 2 communities.
So there are only 2 communities that this would affect, or you've only heard from 2?
I've only heard from 2.
Could there be others? In other words, are there other communities involved in this particular program?
There are 26 communities in the state right now that are villages or communities of the second class, which this bill would pertain to. That have LBA 40
potentially
plans.
there could be 26.
Correct. Correct. There
and
could be beyond that.
It is going to take some effort. Thank you. That's all I will ask you. It will take some effort and time by the auditor, and it's easy for the auditor to say, well, at this point it's costing nothing because nothing's being done. But as Senator Fulton had underlined, it's going to take some time. It's going to cost some money. And the more cities or villages or entities that come, the more time of the auditor will be taken. Somebody could argue, then the auditor would not agree to enter a contract to do it for this city or that city or the other, which then creates a very uncertain, unstable environment for this kind of activity, which is mandated. So this may not be the best way to handle this situation. But however it is handled, there would be such a trifling amount of money involved compared to the overall budget of one of these entities, that I don't think it could be looked at as a property tax reduction matter. So I don't think everything that the legislature does that might impact on some locale should be billed as a property tax measure. Let's say you cut the property tax a penny, not on every individual, but a penny out of the budget. I hope I made the point. That's all I have, Senator Adams, and thank you very much.